Welcome, everyone. You're listening to Nephology, the podcast dedicated to crypto, accounting, business, finance, and much, much more. I'm Joe David, the founder of Nephos Group and Miner. Please note that all conversations recorded are professional opinions, and if you'd like to know more or gain support, please reach out to the team directly. Now on to the next episode. Hello everyone, welcome to the latest episode of the Nephology podcast. Delighted to welcome Inder with me today. Inder, how are you?
I'm great, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Thanks for coming along, and I've been excited since we decided to do this, and it's been a while because you went to Italy and had a nice little trip, but I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while, so thanks for coming on.
No, I appreciate you hosting us. It's a pleasure.
And we had Shivani, your wife, on the podcast a few episodes back, so there may be some, not crossover, but kind of similar sorts of conversations here. But Shivani and I were very much talking around the kind of ops finance side of what you guys do, but really keen to hear from your side. So yeah, why don't we start with a quick intro into who you are and I guess maybe what Pixelynx and KOR Protocol are.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm Inder, the CEO and co-founder of a company called Pixelynx. We're building an ecosystem of products around the entertainment landscape, bringing amazing IPs onto the blockchain and unlocking new ways for them to monetize, whether it's through tokenizing their assets, allowing co-creation or distribution into games, for example. So it's really building a consumer network for entertainment IP on the blockchain, working with a bunch of amazing partners, Black Mirror, the TV show, Sony Pictures, artists like Deadmau5 is a co-founder, and yeah, really across the board of entertainment on the blockchain.
So just to touch on that then quickly, like where did the Deadmau5 link come from? Like how did you, like he's obviously a fairly well-known person, but at the same time, he's probably a unique taste in terms of music, and things like that. Not everybody, he's not like a Miley Cyrus or, someone like that, right, in terms of what he does. So how did that come about and what was his interest in the kind of blockchain IP side of things?
Yeah, I think we'll probably touch on some parts of this, just kind of going through like my journey in the industry. When I was 10 years ago in my early 20s, I set up my first company, which was very much focused within music culture primarily. I was doing a lot of work with brands and talent. And I was just really interested in kind of looking at how we could help artists unlock new revenue streams and kind of transform the way they monetize their IP. Joel or Deadmau5 he's like a visionary artist. He's always been at the forefront. He uses technology in a way that most artists don't. Many people don't know. He programs in the Unreal Engine. He's a coder.
Oh, right.
He creates digital art as well. Like he's a very multi-talented individual. And so when we were setting up the initial idea for Pixelynx, the vision was to kind of blend between blockchain, gaming, and entertainment. And so we were thinking who would be the best people who really understand this, who aren't just faces, but really understand where the technology is going. And so Deadmau5 was number one on the list, alongside Richie Horton, who's also one of our partners. And, this was when COVID had just started.
Okay.
So the music industry was on its knees, right? It lost all of its business model, really. Touring was not possible. And so a lot of artists were thinking about what's next. Like, how do we ensure that there's going to be a future for artistry outside of just purely relying on live events? And so the early vision was, let's explore what those new mediums could look like. And I think he was always really excited about that.
Yeah, super interesting as well, because when you think back to the COVID time, there were so many things that people were like, what will we do in the future if we can't do this? And so many of those things now have actually come back, right? So touring's back and stuff. But I imagine they couldn't even get into studios to record. And I'm sure after things got loosened a little bit, they could have a core group of people, I guess, that they could go into a studio with. But they couldn't even do that, I guess, at some point. So it was then maybe they wanted to monetize back catalog or, like you say, other ways, right?
For sure. And I think the music industry is a really complicated one because when you compare it to film and TV or gaming, it's the smallest. Gaming is almost 10 times bigger in terms of revenue. I think music makes, let's say, 50 billion a year. Gaming makes about 300 billion. And so the music industry doesn't monetize very well. The music doesn't actually make that much money. The artists make most of their money through merchandise and touring. And so there is a need for better solutions that can allow artists to actually monetize the core of their craft, which is their music. And so, what we've seen is, even products that can just monetize a few thousand fans can make artists more money than a year of streaming on Spotify, where you've got millions, if not hundreds of millions of streams. So, I think a lot of artists are thinking about this, like, what is the next business model? What's the next medium of consumption that allows them to make money through their core art form, which is ultimately their music?
And I guess it's interesting because a lot of, and I'm not connected in the music industry, but from what you read online and stuff, you see a lot of these artists that, especially the hip hop world, Jay-Z and people like that, they build their business empire outside of just the music, right? So the core music maybe is where they make some money, but then they use that money to go into other things. But it does take away from what their actual passion is, It's great that they can make money elsewhere, but they probably would love it if they could make money in their own industry, right?
Yeah, I think so. It's a shame, right? Like, if you look at the evolution of the music industry from sort of the, let's say, early 90s, where, it was really at its peak in many ways. We had MTV, people were buying albums, people were willing to pay for music. The rise of Napster and illegal downloading kind of created a almost moment of chaos and fear. And the evolution towards streaming, although a better solution than illegal downloading, has completely flipped the economics on its head. So, music just does not monetize in the same way anymore. It's free, in principle.
Yeah. And effectively, I know obviously Spotify, but I use Apple Music more just because I was out on Apple devices and stuff. But, you pay 15 quid a month or whatever it is, and you get as much music as you can possibly get. I remember, like you say, back in the day, I'd pay 15 quid for an album,
right?
So, I'd get one album for that. Now I get whatever I want, whenever I want. And, if I wake up in the morning and go, do you know what, I want to listen to X today, I can listen to it. I don't have to worry about, have I got the CD, where do I put it, or have I downloaded the right thing or whatever. So it's a totally different world, isn't it, to where it used to be, I guess.
It's amazing for the customer, for the fan, right? Like, because ultimately the cost is marginal, but very tough for the artist. And so I think that's been a big area for a lot of companies trying to focus, is like, how do we help unlock new business models for artists to earn a living? Because I think there's a 1,000 fan theory is one kind of approach, right? You only need 1,000 fans to really start to build up a sustainable revenue stream, 6-figure as a foundation kind of revenue stream. So more products that can help artists connect directly with their fans and monetize with their core fan group is sort of the direction the space is going. And so when we connected with deadmau5 and Richie Hawtin and even their managers, they all also, like a lot of people in the industry, believe that is the future that needs to be moved towards. Because an example like Spotify or streaming, the artist has no connection to the user. They don't know who's listening to their music. They don't know who their super fans are. There's no way for them to have a deeper relationship. And I think blockchain, games, new technologies can really help facilitate that and give them more tools and more power to build their career.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess when Pixelynx first started, then, like you say, around sort of COVID time, what was the core vision? Was it to bring kind of music IP on chain, or was it to monetize art or give artists more monetization opportunities? And then how did it go from? Obviously, we all know what businesses are like. You start with one idea, you end up with 55,000 different other ideas. But so how did the evolution of Pixelynx?
Yeah, I think, I've always thought in the context of ecosystems. Like, I always think about the whole value chain. And so the early business plans, I was looking at some even yesterday, actually. It's quite funny just kind of seeing how far you've kind of come and where things are. But we mapped out the full stack from the foundation, which is creator tools, like just systems to help artists make music. And then you go up the ladder, and it's like the further up you go, you get to streaming, fan engagement, games. And we were thinking that ultimately we would love to build an ecosystem that can help artists from creation all the way down to monetization. So we had to pick our battles, like, where do you start? And so, initially gaming was a big focus. We were really interested in looking at what interactive formats of music could look like. We built multiple products. I think we built 3-4 different products over the course of 2 years, testing, iterating, just seeing what would work and learning a lot throughout that process. Like, what are the challenges? What are the things that the industry is not comfortable with? What do the fans like? What's monetizing? And so, that journey took us further and further back down to like the base infrastructure, which was if we can first bring the music onto the blockchain and have the rights and the licenses on the blockchain, we could enable all of the different types of use cases. Because one of the biggest challenges with music is it's so fragmented. There's multiple rights holders involved. You take a song and it could have 20 people involved in the creation of that piece of music.
I'm sorry to jump in, but by that, do you mean like, because obviously if they sample another piece, that's one thing. But like, if it's an original piece that I write, where are those other? Just for those that don't know, where are those other people?
So typically, you can look at like Spotify has a good feature where you can click on song credits and you'll see. So like you'll see there's writers, people who may have actually helped contribute to the song by writing either lyrics or adding melodies, chord progressions. They are all due a stake in that piece of music. So usually it's a very collaborative process, especially when you look at mainstream music. I'd say 99% of the pop songs on the charts are not written by a single person. They usually have maybe 5, 10, 20 people involved in that creative process. And then you've got labels, you've got publishers, you've got all these different stakeholders. And so when you try to do the traditional things, let's say streaming, okay, that's one use case, but games, remixing, AI licensing, these are such new kind of worlds that you need to get approvals from everyone. And this is what we came up against. We were building these products and we knew it would be a challenge, but it was like, just to get the music, we might spend 3 to 6 months negotiating with a rights holder. And they don't even have all the rights we need.
Even if deadmau5 says, I want to do this for my song or for my album or for whatever I'm doing, and it's got my name attached to it, there's every chance that it could not go through because other rights holders deny it or demand certain things or whatever.
Exactly. And so there's a lot of friction there and a lot of operational challenges to get all the approvals you need. And so one part of our vision, which as we were building these, was if we could bring all those rights holders into a seamless platform where everyone knows who owns the IP and the licenses are there, approvals can be done much quicker and they could be done in a almost instantaneous way where I don't need to go ask for permission. The rights are already pre-approved for new use cases. So that's really what led us to the KOR Protocol.
I was going to say, so how did then KOR, and does KOR stand for anything?
No, just KOR is like, KOR is like the idea of, the core identity of an artist, the core identity of an IP.
Yeah, nice.
So that led us to KOR, which is basically our IP infrastructure. It's not just for music. We have film and TV IP on it and much more. Thousands of artists, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of IP assets that we're tokenizing. And those include the media files, the licenses, which tell you what you can do with that piece of IP, and then also the royalties. So, whether it's earning those royalties or splitting royalties with people. The idea is to bring all of those on the blockchain and then build products on top of it. And it's especially important, I think, in a post-AI future. We're seeing a lot of examples of companies building multi-billion-dollar empires off the back of other people's work, scraping the internet and not asking for permission. And so there's a need for these new tools that can help artists, one, just protect their IP and then tap into these new growth opportunities, whether it's I want to let people remix my music, or I want to let a game developer integrate it into a game, or I want an AI company to build, can build products off my assets. You need to be able to give the artists or the IP holders full control. And so that's the base layer of the whole ecosystem.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I guess it's one of those things where sometimes you don't even know where your product's being used, right? Or your output, the song, the whatever it may be, because it could be in all these different places, right? And it's very hard. Obviously, you've got people that are checking and finding the bigger you are, the more money you've got, the more people you've got to check these things. But in reality, it must be very hard for artists to really know, and like you say, then to really, and even if they do find something that's being used without their permission, then they've got to go through the legal process and litigate against it, and it's not a simple process, right? So I can see 100% the use case, and on that, I guess then we're talking about IP and we talked a lot about music so far, but you guys have got the exclusive Black Mirror license. Is exclusive the right?
We're launching Black Mirror's token, which is going to be a really exciting part of their evolution as a franchise. From most people probably aware of the Black Mirror show, right? It's one of the most iconic dystopian sci-fi shows.
Watched it.
It's very, very dark. You might need a stiff drink after you watch a few of the episodes. But it's created by this visionary Charlie Brooker, who's one of the most incredible minds in kind of TV and film. And what's really interesting about it is it's almost predicted the futures we live in. That's what people find really fascinating about it. It kind of paints the picture of these little worlds of society, maybe a few years away from where we are, that use technology in crazy ways. It might have drones, AI technology, brain implants that can play back your memories. These are all different, technologies that they talk about. And then you kind of see the world unfolding, and it's like Charlie Brooker's kind of predicted so much of where things are moving. So it's a perfect fit for bringing it onto the blockchain because it's a very tech-forward universe. And so,
Is it a Netflix?
It's a Netflix TV show, and also co-owned by a company called Banijay, which is a publicly traded French company, the largest content producer in the world.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
so there must have been quite a few hoops to jump through to get.
Yeah, it took about a year and a half.
Yeah.
It's a really funny story, actually. I think, this was in 2021 when I was setting up Pixelynx, and, we were in COVID. Everyone was spending a lot of their time in Clubhouse, right?
Oh, yeah. I thought about Clubhouse yesterday, and I was like, where's that gone?
Right.
Well, obviously it's gone nowhere. But...
Yeah. Twitter Spaces, I guess, has become the new Clubhouse.
But it was actually quite a good idea.
It's a great idea, I think, especially when everyone was locked down.
Yeah.
But what was interesting is in Clubhouse, I think it was the formation of the Web3 industry as we sort of saw it evolving. You had all the key leaders. You had the founders of like Dapper Labs. You had the CloneX founders. You had all these amazing artists all talking about this technology and just kind of hypothesizing about what it could be used for, right? Like everyone felt like this could be the revolutionary tech to unlock, so much potential. And so I was in a Clubhouse space and someone asked me the question, if you could work with any IP. We were talking about storytelling and things of that nature. It's like, if you could work with any IP, which would it be? And for me, Black Mirror was the first one that came to my mind. Bandersnatch had just come out a little bit, which was one of their like branching narrative like shows. It's like a choose your own adventure show on Netflix. Like you choose what happens next, and it will take you to a different part of the episode. Wow. So very interesting. And so I was thinking a lot about that IP and like it would be such a perfect fit, for blockchain. And then just went down a journey, met the teams and basically had to educate them over a year and a half about the role of NFTs, the role of tokens, and how this technology could, one, give them a much better relationship with their community because they could reward them, their fans, with tokens for positive actions. And they could personalize things much better, and they could use this to really build a global, fan base, which they didn't necessarily have direct access to, right? Like TV shows, they make the show, people consume it, and then that's sort of it. And so the idea was, let's create a hub for the Black Mirror franchise to build a core community, and then use things like tokens and NFTs to reward activity and engagement. And so we're about to launch the token, coming out in a few weeks, and
nice.
It's
may already be out by the time this episode gets out, depending on how quickly we get it out. Yeah. And what's the benefit to obviously this will progress over time, I'm sure, but if I'm a Black Mirror fan, what's the benefit to me to buying the token, for example?
So there's a number of things that we're kind of baking in. So one is access to consumer experiences. So one of the first experiences is based on a virtual assistant that gives you a reputation score. So you can earn reputation by playing experiences, by collecting NFTs, doing a bunch of other experiences on chain, and you basically earn tokens as a reward for that. You can then use these tokens to buy products. You can use them to access different experiences. So it works as almost like a soft currency, or currency within the Black Mirror universe.
Internal,
And then there's a few really fun things coming out. So we've done a partnership with an official comic book that's Black Mirror are launching. Some token holders will be able to influence the storylines, vote on covers. A handful will be able to be drawn into these comic books. There'll be 80,000 units, I think, sold globally.
Wow.
And then we'll also create some unique opportunities. So if you're a token holder, you'll also be able to invest into new potential products that are launching. So for example, these comics, up to 20 to 30% of the royalties will be able to be invested into by token holders. So you can become a stakeholder in the growth of this franchise.
Wow.
So it's a blend of, consumer experiences and using it within the ecosystem, and then also being able to really, support and invest into the future of the franchise's growth.
Yeah, that's amazing. That must be like really exciting for you as well to work on, especially if you're a fan of the show and things like that, to be able to bring some of these things to life. And so what's the, I guess, like, Black Mirror is I guess, in a nice possible way, a test case, if you like, as to how this whole thing could work. But what's the bigger picture for you? Where do you see this space going?
Yeah, I think, Black Mirror for sure is the early mover to prove this out and really showcase how, major IPs can build communities using tokens and monetize in a really powerful new way. They'll have a new digital asset that they've built. And then, for us, for sure, we want to turn it into a major project. We want to continue growing it, build new things off the back of this ecosystem. And then we're replicating this with a number of other IPs. So, we have partnerships with like Sony Pictures that we're going to be rolling out. We're speaking to a number of other IPs within the Netflix ecosystem to basically create similar product experiences. So, we think every major IP should have their own token, and they should have an ecosystem that they can monetize and build around their token. Yeah,
and it does make sense, doesn't it? You touched on earlier around, people the artist doesn't know who's streaming on Spotify, and I guess the similar sort of thing on Netflix, the IP holder, so Black Mirror, for example, doesn't necessarily know. Maybe it's slightly different because they're, I guess, part owned by Netflix. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. But I think and this is not a negative on Netflix's part, but it's tough to build super fan communities in a system like that. I think that's not necessarily a product that Netflix needing to focus on right now. It's up to the creators to then think about, right, who is our core fans and how do we engage them and email them and much more.
Yeah, I guess from Netflix perspective, as long as they bring out good content that goes on Netflix,
right,
people will subscribe to Netflix and watch stuff, right? So as far as they're concerned, their focus is getting really good content on platform, if you like, on Netflix. Mm-hmm. But for Black Mirror or other franchises similar, I guess their core is we need to build outside of the Netflix ecosystem as well to help monetize on top of,
for sure,
the ecosystem. And I've always felt as well, we spoke before we kind of came on air, if you like, that ticketing is such an obvious use case for me for blockchain. But I think we mentioned NFTs, or I mentioned to you NFTs, and how, 2021, maybe 22, NFTs, because they came out as these images online and they were worth a lot of money in inverted commas. And, I've got a mutant ape, which is worth significantly less money than when I paid for it at the time. But like they can, NFTs, or the concept of a unique token on the blockchain, I think can add a significant amount of value to, like you say, engagement or, gated access to things. Pre-sale of the next Taylor Swift concert, for example, goes to her token holders first. There's such obvious things like that, I think. But the flip side to that is tokens and stuff have such a negative, or can have such a negative connotation. So how do you manage, with, when all people, maybe Netflix or Black Mirror or whatever, all they see online is the negative side to crypto, blockchain, etc. How have you managed to kind of, I guess, turn the tables and show the real positive opportunities?
Yeah, it's a good question. It takes time to build trust and to show, the way that you're thinking about it is slightly different. It is true. There are a lot of negative connotations with tokens and NFTs, and more traditional audiences might look at it as scams and more. For us, it's first about delivering experiences, right? Like it has to be an engaging experience. Things like tokens are complementary to the core ecosystem you're building. They help make it more engaging. They help create more retention, or can be an incentive to get people to come and try it. But they're not necessarily always the main show. The main show has to be the experience. And that's been a big part of our focus, is focusing on what the experiences are going to be, like how are these going to be fun, engaging things for people to to have fun with, and then ultimately tokens are things you earn as you participate. And so there's a blend, one like focusing very much on experiences, making sure that we're creating these as easy as possible for people to get on board with and understand, like no complex onboarding flows. You don't need to know anything about crypto to use these products. Those are also important. And then we spend a lot of time on compliance. I would say today, for example, I've got a call with a major rights holder and the CEO of its publicly traded company, and 90% of my call is going to be focused on compliance and the end-to-end process on how we're going to launch this token, everything that needs to be done, all the risks that are associated with it, and how we mitigate against them. And so there's a lot of background work, to make sure that they feel comfortable that, they're speaking to a team who knows what they're talking about and has considered all the potential challenges.
All the different bits, yeah. And I guess the core there as well, if you've got the right intentions from the start, it's quite easy to make sure you don't do anything wrong because you haven't got those intentions. And I'm not saying that everybody whose token has not done so well has had bad intentions, but maybe they haven't thought things through properly. Maybe they haven't, trusted the right people. I'm sure there's a lot of that out there where, these artists or these actors or these whatever trust the wrong people, and then it hugely damages their brand and stuff like that. But
happens all the time.
Yeah, this will be, just for clarity though, the token itself will be a as in like it will be a tradable token on normal kind of, so people will be able to speculate in the price of it. But the concept for you is that you try and limit how much people want to speculate because they love what they get from holding it. Yeah,
I think that what we've seen is ultimately communities are really important, and you need loyal holders. There's no doubt that traders are going to play an important role in how token economies evolve, and so you have to consider like traders as well. But I think for the long-term sustainability, it is about core communities. We've kind of seen that without a community, there's no one there, like you said, willing to hold it, willing to support the project. But I would say and we've seen it, tokens are really complicated. The best teams, the most equipped teams can have challenges because market fluctuations can be a problem, or just that something just doesn't resonate with the narrative of the time. And so it takes a lot of careful management, I think, to figure out how to navigate that, and just in some cases maybe reinvent yourself as a project, or figure out a way to scale.
Yeah, and I guess that's the other point is timing, launching in the right market, which is always difficult because it's very difficult to time the market and, all those sorts of things. But, launching when the market's at its real low point and everyone's unhappy and there's no real good sentiment in the place, it's never going to work, right? Launching maybe at the top as well might not be a good idea because the only way is down, right? So it's, I guess, getting that market, it's very difficult. You can see your face is very difficult, but I guess that's super important as well, right?
So tough. I mean, like, I've considered it so many times, like, should we have launched earlier? But like, ultimately you need a long-term roadmap, and you need to have a strategy in place to mitigate against some of these risks, whether it's not having, a full amount of your token supply out, and kind of phasing it and kind of building up a bit of momentum. But yeah, it's really challenging. I've seen, like I said, I speak to so many founders, some of the best who said there's no win scenario that you're always going to be in. Like at some point you're going to be in a difficult position, and at some points you're going to be winning, and you almost just have to be willing to appreciate that the fluctuations are part of building in this market, and you need to have tough skin. Community's expectations are high. When, like you said, when price is up, everyone's happy. When price is down, death threats get thrown around. In the world. It's a strange industry. I think we have to look outside of this bubble that we've created. That's the most important thing. I love everything Web3 represents. It's lost its way a lot over the last few years, and crypto Twitter is an echo chamber, right? There's no doubt about it. Like, why I'm excited about working with the likes of Black Mirror and the artists we work with and the IPs is they reach a much larger fan base, and if we are going to grow this industry, we have to figure out a way to onboard new people.
And that was going to be, I guess, my next question was, like, you talked about people don't need to necessarily know blockchain to get involved in this. But, if I was going to ask you about other business models that you see as a real opportunity to go on chain, but I guess the first part to that is you may see these opportunities, but how do they get these people involved if they don't understand? So how are you bridging the gap, if you like, between non-crypto natives and crypto natives?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think account abstraction is probably one of the best developments in the industry. That is, in basically allowing users to transact with wallets and crypto without needing to have seed phrases and things of that nature. So that's probably the most important piece, like just removing that initial construct of a wallet. I think over time you educate them to then actually
go to it.
But that's the first step is like, all right, you don't, people understand digital currencies in terms of like Fortnite, V-Bucks, things. So, if you create it in a similar dynamic, but then just slowly educate them and then show them more ways that they can use this, technology, I think it's a crawl, walk, run approach.
Yeah.
And so we think about it in a few ways. Like we do have like a questing system of sorts, like that allows users to go up the leaderboard, and to get to like a level 3, you then ultimately have needed to have engaged with a few different things. And so there's a learning process.
Yeah, nice.
You're a beginner first, and you've got a wallet we've created for you.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, if you want to go all the way down, you can learn about these other things, and if you don't want to, then it's perfectly fine.
Yeah,
right?
You can still get the same benefits and experience from not doing that, but
Right.
at the same time, I'm sure you and I both agree that we feel self-custody storage of assets and things like that is significantly better than third-party trust, of course. But but you don't have to go down that route if you don't want to.
For sure. I think it's also important to note that, maybe a lot of the new users who are coming into this ecosystem aren't going to be holding tens of thousands of dollars of digital assets in their wallets. They may be transacting with low hundreds, and that's sort of the nature of their engagement. And so the idea of like true ownership is not as pressing as it is for others. They just need a seamless experience, and their monetary kind of actions are a little bit lower, and there's nothing wrong with that in terms of the way they participate.
Yeah, absolutely. So where do you see what other business models do you see really as kind of core on-chain, like ripe for this sort of business model?
I think the whole RWA tokenization, movement is a really important one. Like that is ultimately the transition of traditional business models onto the blockchain. So bringing royalties on chain, I think is fascinating, especially for like the music industry. If there's a few companies we work with who basically process your royalties on Spotify, but then pay you on chain. And what's really interesting with that is you can then immediately get loans. You can get you can sell your royalty assets to other potential investors. And so that's a really interesting bridge. I think bringing royalties onto the blockchain, I think, makes a lot of sense. There's others that are, I think it's the more decentralized you go, the better it becomes, arguably, right? If like some of the challenges exist when you have like equity-based organizations trying to manage token economies, and figuring out how the value moves so cleanly between these two can be challenging. So to me, like the best business models are probably when they become ultra decentralized, and the flywheel can really just be as trustless as possible. But yeah, I would say for me, RWA tokenization, royalties on chain, that's a great North Star for any IP holder to start to move towards.
And do you think the artistry movement, or the actors, or whoever it may be, do you think they could, because obviously it doesn't feel hugely incentivized to the current, if you like, middlemen to break down that and put it on chain? Because for me, I'm looking at it and I'm going, if you put a royalty on chain under a smart contract, in theory, that person could be paid for their royalties every day, right? In theory, through because there's no additional work, as long as the smart contract works it, So, and then when it comes to auditing that and making sure that everything's done properly, it's so much easier. But if I'm the middleman in that, and I'm getting a cut, if you like, or there's a reason that actually it taking a little bit longer is in my benefit and stuff like that, are they in control? The artists in control? Do you think there's enough Like how does that dynamic work?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it depends on industry by industry for sure. But the major labels, for example, are not incentivized to make that happen. The bureaucracy and the lack of transparency and the slow payments are part of their business model to some extent, right? And so,
but you've got Sony on board.
We work with Sony Pictures.
Okay, not Sony Music.
And we do have Sony artists who are releasing and more. But I would say for them to do a full migration, it is a challenging thing to move towards. You know, there's many reasons for them not to do it because they ultimately disintermediate themselves. And you know, I was telling you earlier, like one of my friends, he posted this thread on LinkedIn. He said, you know, I'm due $200,000 and I've been constantly calling this major label who is not answering my calls. And every time I try get through to someone, it's someone on support in India, let's say. Nothing wrong with that, but someone on support in India. And I have to then start that conversation again and again. And I can't get an audit to tell me how much I'm meant to be paid. And it's been 2 years, and he's like, I'm due $200,000 plus dollars, and this is a major record label, and it's all the comments were filled with "Me too, me too, me too." Like everyone's basically experiencing the same.
And I guess if you're, like we mentioned earlier, you know, Eminem, Kanye West, you know, people like that, then maybe you can afford, you know, because the money you've built over the years, you know. But if you're a small artist, and I think people forget that. Same in the sports industry, you know, tennis, for example. You know, if you're 800 in the world in tennis, you know, you're not making, you know, very good money in the grand scheme of things, right? And you can't afford to wait for prize money, or I mean, it's a different example, but you see my point, right? And I'm sure a lot of these smaller artists, they can't afford to wait for 200K or whatever it is. You know, it could end up meaning that they can't carry on doing what they're doing. They've got to go and get another job, therefore they can't, you know, produce music or films or whatever. So it's hugely, it's such a difficult one because you totally get it, especially as we're both business owners, right? You get it from Sony's perspective or the huge record label's perspective. Why would they, you know, decentralize their whole business model? But then when you're the artist, it makes no sense for it to be in the current way. So there's got to be a middle ground, I guess, right? Yeah,
it's going to take time, I think, to transition. You know, I think what we've seen is, and I have nothing against major record labels, right? Generally speaking, I mean, you know, their business model is questionable at times. But, you know, typically what we've seen is they only move when they're fully incentivized, AKA they own a stake in what's happening. And I would say the music industry is a little bit too complex, especially if we're talking about music. Like, it's a little bit too complex in that, you know, there's so many different stakeholders between like publishers, rights holders, labels, artists, performing rights organizations. It's a bit of a mess in terms of how money moves around, and there's no unified regulation. The US thinks about it differently to the way Europe thinks about it. And so, and the Middle East doesn't even have some of the systems in place that we talk about that the rest of the world does. So, you know, there needs to be a move towards a more kind of cohesive vision for things like metadata, things like, you know, royalty payments.
But again, that's easy on the blockchain. Like metadata, for example, super simple to link that to like an NFT or a token of some kind and link the metadata, and then like super simple.
For sure.
But I guess it's still that.
It's going to take it's a whole movement, you know, and I think, you know, what we're doing, we've partnered with some amazing organizations who are solving different parts of this problem at different layers of the stack. And the idea is collectively we can then present some solutions that for the first time ever show how a performing rights organization can report back to a label and an artist and have payments back to them in real time, but it requires a few building blocks to be connected. And so, you know, we'll have a few use cases. One of our products is called Chorus. It's a interactive remix platform where fans can remix music from different artists within a few clicks. And you can get a license to then commercialize the music you've created without needing to sign anything, just issued to you in real time. And what's really cool is, on the one hand, we see artists make more money in 2 days than they would in a year on Spotify. Like Imogen Heap, we did a drop with her. She's an amazing Grammy-winning musician. She was like on this talk, she's like, how long would it take us to make that amount of money with that single on Spotify? Like years. She's like, it'd take years. And this was done in a day, right? And
was this by somebody else, effectively?
I was launched on our product. Okay. Yeah. She's like, it would take years for us to make that money back in a comparable format in streaming, and we didn't need millions of streamers. We needed a couple thousand fans.
Wow.
Shows you how broken it is. But what's the next step is we're going to connect a few more stakeholders in that ecosystem so everyone gets paid. The label, the artist, the performing rights organizations that need to be involved. And, for the first time, you'll see a new use case for music consumption and monetization with full transparency and payments in stable coins to everyone in the value chain. And so, like I said, these things take time. They take proof of concepts.
Yeah.
They take whole industries to come together. And, for the large part, the majors are not incentivized. The independents are incentivized, and that is the fastest growing sector in music. And Right.
They've got to start thinking, oh, okay, well, we don't want to lose her, so what are we going to do about that?
Yeah, for sure. I think you're right. Like it takes a balance of these artists, global artists to put their name behind this and try it and show a path. But also I think it's really amazing to see like the independent creator movement. What we're seeing now is artists and creators are able to build much more sustainable businesses without needing to do the traditional deals that they've done in the past. Whether it's a YouTuber who is building an empire in their bedroom, or a musician who's able to distribute through, and reach fans through TikTok and sell directly and distribute directly. They don't need the infrastructure that a label has provided. They can use ad hoc services and build an empire themselves. And that is the future. There's no doubt. It's that's the way the world is going.
Yeah, and I guess if you're the size of Sony Music, that's not music to your ears, as they say, right?
They need to adapt, right?
Yeah. But I guess it's like, like take banking, 10 years ago, or I don't even know, however long before internet banking came out, everyone went into a branch, or like checks, for example, in the UK, we haven't had checks in the UK for a long time, right? But like, everyone would go into branch, or they do this, that, and the other. Whereas now, if anyone has to go into a branch, I have to go into a branch to do that. Why would I want to go to a branch?
Right.
Unless you're my dad, who loves doing in branch stuff. But like the point is like there was an adaptation, right? There was an adoption curve of like on day one, how many people trusted internet banking, all the way through to now. You if a bank didn't have internet banking, you probably wouldn't use them.
Right.
You know what I mean?
For sure.
So that I guess, and that would have changed the way banks work and the way that banks made money, and all those sorts of things. I would imagine, doing payments now online and how quick that can go through and stuff. And I guess it's then when stablecoins come in. There's talk, more by the XRP community than anyone else, I guess, but of XRP replacing Swift, for example. And I guess, Swift look at that and go, why would we want that to happen? But actually, they need to look at embracing something, right? Because stablecoins are much better and easier to use and blockchain protocols than the traditional system. So I guess it's, like you say, it's that adoption curve. And again, the more people that go on that journey and go, well, actually, I want to use this way. I feel like this way is a better way.
For sure.
Maybe it starts to push the incumbents along.
I think so. I think that's naturally going to be, and you mentioned the adoption curve. I think that is going to be the way, right? The independents will prove it out, and it'll be kind of shown with the more like revolutionary like companies, startups, emerging independent artists, creators. And then, it's like, all right, this actually is a meaningful business model, and it slowly works its way up, the ladder. But we are in a much better place as an industry now than where we were 4 years ago. I remember when we started, and, the lack of clarity around regulation, the ups and downs that we've been through, of course, have been challenging. There's a real air of optimism, right, around what blockchain adoption looks like. Privy just being acquired by Stripe, yesterday. So that's such a great signal for where this is all going. And there's so many more. Like you could name dozens of things that are happening that show institutional adoption is here, and this technology is not going anywhere.
Yeah, no, and I think for, like or not Donald Trump, I think a lot of the things that he's opened up in the US, simple things like banks, custody, and crypto. For institutions, that's the only way that they would get involved is if their bank was able to custody their crypto, for example, right? They're not going to put millions of dollars in a MetaMask wallet on the CFO's computer. Like, they're just not going to do that. Do you know what I mean? So I think there's, like you say, from an institutional perspective, we're starting really now to see, and that is the next wave, I think, of institutional
for sure
adoption. I want to touch quickly on AI, because no conversation these days is complete without AI being involved, right? But where, like for you, where do you see? Because I think you've got maybe not a slightly different take, but like from a creativity perspective, from where do you see AI coming into play, and the real kind of, again, I imagine what we'll see is, ChatGPT comes out, everyone goes, wow, I can type in there and it gives me an answer. And then eventually we get to a point where AI becomes something completely different to what it was when it first came out. Where do you see that journey?
Yeah, I think it's a renaissance that we're living in, for sure. This is one of the most exciting times to be alive, because we have this superhuman ability now to access information and process information in such a groundbreaking way. And so, if you have an idea, it's at the tip of your fingertip. It's just one click away, right? To be able to vibe code a product, or to make a piece of music, or generate a video. And so I think that's incredibly refreshing. I think we'll see so much amazing new creativity, and so many people being able to build things that they never imagined, right? Whether they're products or artistic expressions. So definitely on that piece, it's superhuman. That is what's kind of happening.
Are you seeing, sorry to interrupt, but are you seeing artists using it for maybe in their music creation, or in their, where maybe they might back and forth with somebody else, they can back and forth maybe with an AI agent or something like that. Are you seeing that yet?
Yeah, I think so. There's many use cases that are really interesting, like the AI voice use case is one. If someone is kind of preparing a song, and they can't sing, all of a sudden they have a tool that allows them to produce very advanced vocals and melodies that turn their rubbish singing into like genuinely something decent. And so I think that's amazing. You see that a lot. I think the top tier artists, like Timbaland just announced a new virtual AI artist that he's launching, and a whole roster for this. And I think the more forward-thinking artists are leaning in and kind of seeing it as like a new medium for expression, because if you're an artist, it's not just about playing a guitar or some keys. It's technical at times, right? You're thinking about frequencies and a lot of other nuance.
How a melody fits, and
right. There's so much behind it, and so I think a lot of the tech forward artists are just going to be really excited about that. It's like, right, this is a new tool, it's a new toy. I think obviously the big challenge, the elephant in the room, is the lawsuits and the ethical side of things. Disney just sued Midjourney yesterday, and it's obvious, right? These are all trained on their data sets and more. So that stuff is going to work itself out. It has to. Regulation moves too slow. So it's going to require like solutions to come in, things like KOR, things like others that are being built to try help, unlock new business models. But yeah, at a high level, I look at this as the renaissance of our generation. It's going to be a really amazing time to see. I've seen examples like we're vibe coding internally, and I showed one of our junior marketing guys vibe coding, and within a day he's like building products, things that are helping him do his job more effectively. That, like, how is he managing his creator networks? How is he giving briefs to them? Currently it's on Discord. Now he's got a little solution. And I think that is just such an amazing, like, again, evolution, right? To see it does create some big challenges. Like, where's the moat, right? Where's the moat? If anyone can build now, is it really in the tech, or is it in your ability to build communities, distribute, market, sell?
But I think some of that came in already, and I mean this in a positive way, and I don't want to get sued by Mr. Beast as an example. But take Mr. Beast as an example. Where's his skill set, right? And I'm not criticizing in any way, because I wish I had what he had. But his skill set clearly is in building a community that value and want to pay for what he does.
For sure.
Right? You get the greatest artist that's ever existed in terms of the physical kind of artistry of what they do. If they can't build a community these days, it is game over in a way.
Game
right?
over. You're right.
So I think that's the other thing is like it's not just AI. I think that's brought this community piece. It's everything has led towards this. If you want to be big in this kind of digital world that we live in now, you need to be able to build a community and bring people on the journey with you.
I agree.
My last question on the AI / kind of artistry route. So it was quite a number of years ago. A couple of our clients, we've got like Decentraland we work with, and they were called like Skull Crushers or something like that. There was this like AI online band. Do you think that we could maybe see a little bit of a renaissance in the metaverse type world, and maybe in not the same format, but because I still think the metaverse, take Roblox effectively a metaverse, like do you think that could come back to life?
For sure. One of the biggest challenges a couple years ago, and when we started Pixelynx, it was a combination of a few technologies we were looking at, like AI, blockchain, gaming, and I'd read a research paper just before like LLMs were introduced, which was around kind of generative tech, and was showing how people were able to generate these virtual worlds very quickly, but the technology hadn't moved fast enough over the last few years. Only it's recently, and so that was one of the blockers. Was the ability to create 3D assets, virtual worlds, was still generally cost prohibitive unless you're using a Roblox or like a Fortnite. And so now it's much more accessible. You can take a picture, create a 3D asset off the back of it within a few clicks, and now you have a 3D asset. And so yeah, I would say for sure, like the technology is going to push that side of things much more fast for sure. And so we'll see Roblox will integrate these tools, Unreal will have them in them, and more for sure.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, thank you so much, Inder, for coming on.
Appreciate it.
Fascinating. I could literally talk all day about all this stuff because I find it like fascinating, and the opportunities are so big. So, I guess just to end off, like where can people find you, and maybe more information about the Black Mirror token and things like that?
Yeah, so I would if you want to follow me on Twitter, Inder Phull 22, that's a good place to catch most of my thoughts. LinkedIn as well is a good place to drop a line. You can go to korprotocol.io to understand what's going on with KOR, and then also Black Mirror, you go to blackmirrorclub.com. That is the main dashboard where you can register now. I think we've got a couple 100,000 users who've signed up. So if you sign up, you can start participating, make sure you're eligible for the upcoming airdrop. It may already be out. So if it's already out, then, you can start participating anyway and engage.
And we'll link all that in the description as well.
For sure. So. But yeah, always open. Like anyone wants to reach out, partnerships, anything else, like just drop us a line.
Amazing. Inder, thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
See you soon.